Joining me today, I have local author from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Jerrad Peters. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Sylvia. Glad to be here.
I would love for you to tell me about your brand new book. I believe it was released just last month, The Way Back Home.
Yeah, so The Way Back Home, and the full name of it is The Way Back Home, Revisiting the Renaissance and Reformation of the First Flemish Mennonites, is essentially, it's an origin story. In my other research, I'm interested in origin mythologies. We can get into that in a second. But then there's also obviously a more personal element to examining stories that I was personally told and kind of live in still.
Yeah, I love that. You talk about Mennonites. Where does this book and this journey, where did it take you when you were doing this research?
Right. Okay. So in the first chapter of the book, I talk about how I struggle to find this where to start. And when writing history, I have a note on the side of my desk that says, "It matters where we enter the story." Um, Historians have a lot of choices to make about that, so it matters where we enter. And so I wanted to actually go to the places where I was going to enter the story. For me, that meant it meant the Low Countries essentially. It meant particular parts of Flanders, and really zeroing in on that a corridor between Bruges and Antwerp. Um, so visiting churches and cathedrals, looking at the art in the galleries there, researching church records, genealogy records, and demographic records from the time. For example, what were most people doing? What were they working at? I had the benefit because so much of it is wonderfully recorded that I was able to create kind of an aggregate family um, based on all this information. And just I used them kind of to relate to how the world was changing around them, just so that people could kind of understand based on just a common family unit what that world would have looked like, how they would have interacted with it as it changed so quickly.
Absolutely. Peters, if you don't mind. So I have a Mennonite background. My last name's St. Cyr. I was a Clausen. I find that, the Mennonite history, depending on which group of Mennonites you grew up with, you might not know a whole lot. So with Peters as a background, once you actually got into the research of it, I would love to know, especially on your travels, what was maybe something that was most surprising to you?
Yeah, okay, I'll answer that in two parts. So yes, there is my last name, and for most people who identify as Manitobans or Mennonites in Manitoba who have a Mennonite background and live in Manitoba and really also BC, parts of the United States, there is a common migratory story that starts in the Low Countries and migrates east. We all know we kind of begin at that part. A lot of the things we are told or that we already know about our history kind of start in the Russian Empire and then bring us to North America, right? So my book doesn't deal with any of that stuff really. I wanted to go quite a bit further back than that and retrace um, kind of the prehistory of the history of that story. Something that surprised me was we're kind of presented, or maybe I'm just going to say I have this preconceived notion, and other people probably do too, or this picture of a very austere, pious people, um, but that really wasn't the case. Um, if you go back to the beginning, the first one or two generation of Flemish Mennonites, they're colorful, they're involved, they're doing art, they're writing songs, they're excelling in their field professionally. Um, they're interacting with some of the most famous other families that we have from that period. I look at some pre-ancestors to what we would consider Mennonite ancestors, and they're interacting with the Medici, they're interacting with the Portinari. Don't forget that they're living in Flanders along the Scheldt estuary at a time when the ports of Bruges and Antwerp were the most cosmopolitan ports in the world. Antwerp was the biggest port in the world. So they're interacting with this vibrant, global, multi-ethnic, multi-faith community on a daily basis. That color, that just variance of involvement in the world, I understood I would probably find it and probably see it, but not to the extent that I did. And for me, that was really heartening, really kind of justified some of the ideas that I was going into the project with. And I came away with it probably more encouraged about that background than I had expected.
How long? You did traveling? You've covered so many multitudes in this book. How long did all of this take you?
Um, so about a year and a half is, and that's I think pretty standard. Yeah, a year and a half.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, I'm going back to Europe later this month for my it's actually kind of related research. This particular travel will take me to parts of France where I'm researching the origin mythologies of the Franks, which we now associate with post-Roman parts of France and Germany. And there is a commonality with the Mennonite origin story there too, in that you have this, as the Franks do and many European people groups do, a large cataclysmic event or formative event followed by a wandering, followed by a settlement, during which time then you look back at that wandering, that crucible, and start to pick the parts of the story that you're going to keep. Um, and it's important to ask questions about those things.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I've worked in book publishing. I find it very fascinating that you chosen so many avenues all in one book, an art book, a historical book, and then some fiction as well. What was the thought behind that?
Yeah, okay, so there's a selfish component to the art element of it. Um, I'm an art nerd. That being said, in this particular period and location, again, we're dealing with the Northern Renaissance. So a lot of the even primary sources that we have for this time period are pictorial, and they're very, very good. They're effective. My publisher was generous enough to put full color images into the book of some of the paintings that I look at. I look at the people in those paintings, what they were doing, why it was painted, but really, and I write about this in the book, the faces, because the Northern Renaissance artists, even if they're painting a biblical story, a mythological story, really anything, they're using faces of the people that they knew, putting them in there. Even they would use contemporary dress, even if they're painting like a story of John the Baptist or something. Just that was the way that they painted at that time. So you can actually look at the people in those paintings and see what they looked like, see what their mannerisms were like, and I found that very helpful. So I do rely on some of that pictorial evidence for the content. The historical fiction part comes in, like I said, with family that I create from an aggregate of information. And then I have them named and interacting with historically verified people, geopolitics, things that were happening in day-to-day life, just that relational element.
Yeah. Paint a clear picture.
Yeah.
That's great. I would love to know, if you don't mind me asking, uh, again, having Mennonite history, having that Peter's last name, what did your family think about this book?
They're still reading it. I gave it to them for Christmas, right? So,
Nice.
and okay, I'll give her a shout out. I have one aunt who lives in Altona who is sending me emails as she reads through it. And it's obviously, I'm not going to say obviously, but her feedback has been great. But be that as it may, I'm curious what it will be like. We're still at the point of the release where people are probably still reading or about to finish. It's still very new, and then I'm not sure. Will people be scared to engage on the content? Will there be more questions? I suspect so. Reading people tend to want to read and want to learn. And if you're reading this type of book, it is a bit of a heavier read. You're probably going to be reading it for right reasons and to want to learn and to want to enjoy. I wrote it as well. Part of the travel element I include in the content just because I think people will enjoy that part. If they've been places before that are referenced there, they'll enjoy that too. So I think that when you're engaging on something as serious as a serious history, and want that to be read as broadly as possible, you want to create those entry points where people can enjoy, relate, and just have fun reading.
Absolutely. For anyone listening to this, and they are interested in getting the Way Back Home book or following along in your journey as an author, how can they do so?
Just go on Amazon or where you buy your books online and search for The Way Back Home. Google The Way Back Home. Yeah, that's about it.
Nice and simple. I love it. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share today?
I think no, that's good, Sylvia. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jerrad, it's been a pleasure. I always love chatting about my own history as well and hearing about people's passion. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much.